पेश किया जा रहा है। आप हजरात का ज़ौक़ काबिल नज़ारा है कि आप तपते हुए धूप में खड़े हैं। मुझे आपकी तकलीफ का एहसास है, लेकिन मैं समझता हूं कि आपके दिलों में जो इश्क़ रिसालत की चिंगारी अपना काम कर रही है और हजरत मोहम्मद मुस्तफ़ा सल्लल्लाहु ताला अलैहि वसल्लम की यौम विलादत के सिलसिले में आप इस मकाम पर हाजिर हैं। मुझे यकीन है अल्लाह और उसके रसूल के फजल करम पर कि आपको अल्लाह तबारक व तआला बेहतरीन जज़ाए खैर अता फरमाएगा। खुदा के कलाम के बाद और उसके रसूल हजरत मोहम्मद मुस्तफ़ा सल्लल्लाहु ताला अलैहि वसल्लम की बारगाह में नजरानी अकीदत पेश करने के बाद आज की मखसूस और स्पेशल स्पीच जो इंग्लिश में होगी, उसके लिए मैं अपने दोस्त मिस्टर वईद MA से गुजारिश करूंगा कि वो तशरीफ लाएं और यूनिवर्सल होली प्रोफेट हजरत मोहम्मद मुस्तफ़ा सल्लल्लाहु ताला अलैहि वसल्लम के सब्जेक्ट पर आपसे खिताब करें। मिस्टर वईद MA।
No, it's all right. Imam Sahib, Mr. Minister, friends, brothers in Islam, Assalamu Alaikum. I have been requested by Imam Sahib to attempt the impossible task of doing justice to Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu, Alaihi Wasallam as a universal prophet in 15 minutes. As you know, this is an impossible assignment, but I think it would be interesting and perhaps even exciting to try. We are all assembled here to celebrate and to pay homage to a man, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu, Alaihi Wasallam. And it is perhaps appropriate that on such an occasion we should recall some of the attributes of his character which are truly universal and which have always applied in the past and will continue to be applied in the future. The first of these attributes, I think, is a deep concern for humanity. We find this trait in the character of the Prophet very early in his career. He used to repair to a cave on a mountain, and there he used to meditate on the predicament of his fellow creatures, on the society of his time, on the evils of primitive Arabia. This concern led him to become finally the spokesman, the mouthpiece, the messenger of God. He, being deeply moved about some of the evil practices of the society around him, led him to become the champion reformer of Arabia and of future societies. The second attribute of his character, which we might call universal, is his all-embracing love for all God's creatures. We know how deeply he loved his family, how deeply he loved everyone around him. What we do not know very well is that his love extended even to the lower forms of creation, to animals. And we find that while his men were marching to meet in combat the enemies of Islam, he directed that the animals on the way should not be interfered with or molested and ought to be removed to a safe place. We find this love for his fellow creatures to extend beyond the grave. We are told in the hadith that one night his wife, Bibi Aisha, was disturbed to see him going out of the house and followed him. And finally she saw that he had gone to the graveyard, and there he was praying for all the departed souls of the Muslims. This was the all-embracing love that the Prophet professed for man. The third of these attributes we can call bravery. In the teeth of repressive opposition from his enemies, he never compromised, and he always held his head high in the path of God. He never hesitated to fight when required. And the Battle of Badr is a glorious illustration of his bravery in the face of overwhelming opposition. He inspired his men to fight for the cause of Islam, and they succeeded. The fourth of these attributes we might call generosity. The generosity of the Prophet for man, especially for his enemies, is again illustrated by his entry into Mecca after he had conquered it. He gave special instructions that no one should be killed or punished, but that since Mecca had finally been conquered, he was going to forgive and forget what had taken place in the past. And his enemies were finally overcome by this generosity, and they embraced Islam. Many have seen in this a subtlety of diplomacy. They fail to realize the deep-seated love and the deep-seated hatred of violence that animated the Holy Prophet throughout his life. Perhaps the fifth and the last trait I would mention as universal, which we find in all universal prophets, is his piety, compounded of charity, compounded of a desire to be of service to all men. He stressed over and over again the need to pray. In the Quran, almost on every page, we see that men are exhorted to pray. He doesn't speak so often about Ramadan, about fasting, so much as about prayer, as if he knew even then that man would perhaps be inclined to fast a month every year, but would not be inclined so much to pray. These five traits of the universal character of the Prophet, his deep concern for humanity, his love for all God's creatures, his bravery, his piety, and his generosity mark him as an outstanding man. No wonder that very early in his life he became known as the Trusted One, Al-Amin. There is finally one test of universal greatness which we might also consider in relation to the life of the Prophet. And this test is success. How far has the Prophet been successful? All of us here on this side can see the very large gathering that has assembled here today to pay homage to him. This is but an infinitesimal portion of the recognition of the greatness of the Prophet that is given to him all over the world today. The success of the mission of the Prophet is demonstrated again by the fact that there are over 600 million Muslims in the world today, and that when a day like this one comes, they forget all their differences and they come together to pay homage to the Messenger of Allah. The Prophet said, "My community will never be unanimous in error." If today we are unanimous in paying this homage to him, we surely cannot err. But perhaps there ought to be a word of caution. Our love for the Prophet is so great, so profound, so comprehensive, that sometimes we forget that he was a messenger. He was the instrument that God chose to give to man and to the world at large a message of undying value and importance. But as you know, love is blind. Sometimes we can be blinded by our love of the Prophet. And sometimes we forget, we might perhaps give to Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu, Alaihi, Wasallam the kind of reverence that should be reserved for God and for God only. Let us be careful and not set another shrine by the shrine of God. The Prophet himself insisted throughout his life that he was but a man. He was the messenger of God, the greatest of all the men who ever lived. But a man he remains. And the Prophet said to those who were mortifying their persons in austerities to attain the grace of God, he told them, "Why? Be content to be a man." And this is an achievement, because man is the vice-regent of God on earth, and man is superior to angels, because man is endowed with the knowledge of good and evil. Let us therefore give to the Holy Prophet the reverence reserved for the greatest, the last, and the universal Prophet, the greatest of them all. But let us reserve the higher reverence that is due to God for Allah only. I am very pleased to have been here this afternoon at the request of Maulana Sahib, and to have been given the opportunity to see so many of you assembled here. I only wish to express the hope that we shall always be assembled with the same devotion, the same unity, and the same desire to work for the cause of Islam. Assalamu alaikum.
आपके दिलो दिमाग में गर्मी पैदा करने के लिए इश्क़ रिसालत भी है और ऊपर आफताब भी चमक रहा है। जिस्मानी और रूहानी दोनों गर्मी आपको मिल रही है। आइए इस माहौल में हम इस गैदरिंग से फायदा उठाते हुए एक मर्तबे पूरी ताकत के साथ, पूरी कुव्वत के साथ ये समझते हुए कि ये हमारा कौमी नारा है, हम कहें नारे तकबीर। यहाँ पर हजारों मुसलमानों का इज्तिमा है اتنی آہستہ آواز سن لو، یہ ماریشس کی پہاڑیاں سن رہی ہیں. ان پہاڑیوں کو گواہ کر لو کہ تم مسلمان ہو. نعرہ تکبیر! میں اس سے مطمئن نہیں ہوں. نعرہ تکبیر! نعرہ تکبیر! اللہ بہت بڑا ہے. نعرہ تکبیر! نعرہ رسالت! نعرہ رسالت! نعرہ رسالت یا رسول اللہ! نعرہ رسالت! میرے عزیز دوستو، میرے آقا کی تعریف ظاہر ہے کہ وہ ایک سمندر ہے، ایک سی ہے. کون میرے آقا کی تعریف کر سکتا ہے؟ لیکن آپ خیال کریں تو یہ آقا کا کرم ہے کہ اس کی تعریف کرنے کے لیے اتنا کہہ دینا بھی کافی ہے کہ اے آمنہ کے لال، خدا کے بعد تم سب کچھ ہو. خدا کے بعد اے کالی کالی کملی والا، تو سب کچھ ہے خدا کے بعد. بس میرے عزیز دوستو، ابھی آپ یونیورسل ہولی پروفیٹ حضرت محمد مصطفیٰ صلی اللہ تعالی علیہ وسلم کے سبجیکٹ پر مسٹر وعید سے تقریر سن رہے تھے، انگلش اسپیچ. اب میرے محترم دوست مسٹر حسین بخش آپ کے سامنے تشریف لا رہے ہیں. ان کا یہ سبجیکٹ ہوگا اسلام از اے یونیورسل ریلیجن. ابھی آپ نے یونیورسل ہولی پروفیٹ پہ آپ نے خطاب سنا، اب یونیورسل ریلیجن پر مسٹر حسین بخش سے آپ اسپیچ، فرینچ اسپیچ سنیں. اللہ کی دعا. السلام علیکم.